understand that lost 10 tribes are now to be found amongst Western nations, amongst Western peoples. The Israelite tribes were together in the land of Israel. They descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel. Jacob had 12 sons. 12 sons of Jacob. They went down to Egypt. They were oppressed in Egypt. They come back out of Egypt, led by Moses. They were in the wilderness. In the wilderness, they received the Torah. They also worshipped the golden calf. And there were trials and tribulations until eventually they entered the land of Canaan, and they conquered the land of Canaan. They distributed the land amongst the Israelite tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. But they also intermixed with the Canaanites. They learned their ways. They intermarried with them. And this was one of the factors that led them to go down on their moral levels. And eventually they were punished. They had the kings. King Saul was the first king. After him came King David. After David came King Solomon, who built the temple. The son of Solomon was Rehoboam in Hebrew, Rehoboam. He was the son of Solomon, and he ruled over Israel. And in his era, during his reign, 10 of the 12 tribes separated. They seceded. They separated. They set up their own kingdoms, led by Jeroboam ben Nebat. And so you had two kingdoms. You had the kingdom of Judah, which comprised the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And after that, also remnants, refugees from the other tribes. And you had the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel. Independent kingdom of Israel. And it was ruled over by Jeroboam ben Nebat from the tribe of Ephraim. And he ruled over the tribes of Joseph, that is Ephraim and Manasseh, the two tribes of Joseph. Joseph was divided into two sections, Ephraim and Manasseh. And also the tribes of Zebulun and Issachar, of Reuben, of Simeon, of Naphtali, Dan, Gad, and Asher. Should have make a note of concerning Simeon. Simeon technically was to the south of Judah. So many make the mistake of assuming that Simeon was part of Judah. So this is not correct. Simeon was ruled from the northern kingdom. This is confirmed by archaeological findings. Archaeological findings prove that the northern kingdom was the dominant element in the south, in the far south, and which included the region of Simeon, not only politically but also culturally. That the region of Simeon mixed the concepts of biblical belief with pagan concepts, as did the northern tribes. And the northern tribes did that. This is described in 2 Kings. The second book of Kings, chapter 17, describes how the northern tribes went in the ways of the nations around them, how they intermixed with them, how they worshipped idols and foreign gods. And they combined belief in the biblical concepts of belief with pagan notions. And this went on for quite a while, a good couple of centuries or more, till eventually the northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians and taken into exile. And from there they moved to different areas adjoining the region of Assyria, and eventually they migrated all the way to northwest Europe, where they settled. And they settled more or less according to their tribes in general. even some groups that are separated from the tribes have been separated from the tribes through exile and so on, seem to, by a process of historical gravitation, come back and rejoin the tribal bodies, so that we can identify these tribes as concrete units in general. Even though a good degree of intermixing took place, we find that in the British Isles they converged descendants of the two tribes of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. And this was important. Eventually, the British developed. The British had the British Empire, and Britain became a great nation, and also helped initiate the founding of the USA. And the USA received immigrants from all over the earth, especially from areas of Western Europe. And in the beginning, a great many from Germany. And we have chosen in other studies that the migrants to the USA from Germany, they were different from those who stayed behind. And even contemporary sources, that is, government officials in Germany, noticed this, that those who were leaving were different from those who stayed behind. And they can be traced to different groups that in Germany that somehow or other managed to remain separate from the mainstream, until eventually they joined the great migrations to the West. And we find a similar phenomenon in Britain itself. In Britain, you had different groups. There's a structured, in England, you had the different groups. There's a structured population. You had the knights at the top. You had a small middle class, and then you had the serfs and the others. But in addition to that, you had a population that was not associated with any of these groups, that somehow or other in the fens, in the forests, in the open areas, remain separate. And Linda Merkel, a genealogist whose work we admire, she specializes in Ireland, in Irish descent, and also in the descent of populations from Ulster. And she says that there was this separate population that existed in Britain, was semi-independent to some degree or other, that always was there, that a good portion of them were comprised the immigration from Britain to the USA. So they were a foundational element in the foundation of the USA. And this also helps explain sociologically their relatively independence right from the start, from the British establishment, from the rule of kings and so on, because they'd always been more or less on their own. And this is a point that's overlooked, but Linda Merkel has done work on it, and it's worth noting. Another point worth noting is that we found concerns Calvin Cathcart wrote The Races of Mankind, The Origins of Migration, New York, 1960. And he, according to the studies that he did, he says that approximately 87% of the British immigration to the United States in colonial times and later, 87% consisted of persons whose antecedents reach back to Western England and to Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. So if you look at the book of the British Isles, you have different areas. You have the east, and then you have the west, and you have the north. And the west includes Ireland. So the west and the north are different from the east. The east was dominated by present-day England. Present-day England is dominated by the eastern section. That is where London is. That is where most of the population are. And it has more or less always been that way. And but they are different. Their constitution, their ethnic constitution is somewhat and their traditions is somewhat different from that of the East. And out of different groups who settled in the areas that contributed most of the population in the early stages to the USA, we find groups who, according to their names and other indications, may be traced back to Manasseh. For instance, we find the Mercia or Mercia. Mercia may be related to Machir or Manasseh. They were to the northeast. They were to the northeast. They were to the northeast of Wales, in the centre, in the geographical centre of England. And from that area came a great many of the early immigrants to the USA. They also joined the Angles, many of whom also moved to the USA. And we have the Brigands, who were from Ephraim, and elements from Manasseh. And further north, we have the Caledonians, whose name sometimes pronounced as Galadoni, relate back to Gilead. Gilead was an important section of Manasseh in the Bible. Gilead was a grandson of Manasseh, but he was one who contributed a substantial proportion of its population. So this name, Galadoni or Gilead, is to be found amongst the Caledonians. And we also have the Picts in the north, and we have a great number, quite a few names, such as the Karini, Kornabi, Kononak, Keren, K-E-R-E-N, Keren. And this root is mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Amos 13, verse 9. He says, how you rejoice over Lo-Debar, having not taken Canaan for ourselves by our own strength. It's referring to the Assyrians who were conquering the land of Israel at that time. And the Assyrians apparently had conquered an area of Manasseh east of the Jordan River, known as Karnaim. So Karnaim also has this root Keren, so this root is associated with places pertaining to Manasseh. Literally, Karnaim in Hebrew means horn, or horns, two horns. And sometimes in the English translation, they translate this word Karnaim, which is a place name known as Karnaim, is sometimes translated as two horns, so it's worth noting. And we had the Picts in the north, according to Lempriere and Roman reports, were related to the Agathyrsi in the east, to the east of the Roman Empire, were associated with the Khazars. And the Khazars, whatever you've heard about them, they converted to Judaism, but those who actually joined the Jewish people were not numerically significant, but historically some of them did convert to Judaism, some of them did join the present-day Jews. And they had their own traditions that they were descended from the tribes of Simeon and Manasseh. And in Jewish mysticism and Jewish sources, Simeon is associated very much with Manasseh. And we often find elements from Simeon in their places of exile adjoining those of Manasseh. So here too, amongst the Khazars and the Picts, we find elements from Simeon also to have been present. Descendants from Simeon amongst the Welsh, amongst the Seelaws in southern Wales, and in other areas. The bulk of the English in the east we identify with Ephraim. Ephraim was in the region of the Eagles. The Eagles also with angles. The angles were also known as Agili or Agali, and their name pertains to that of Ephraim. Ephraim was known as an Agili, as a bull calf. In the book of Jeremiah, Ephraim is referred to as Agili. The word Agili or Agel, meaning bull calf in Hebrew, might be pronounced as Angli. Angli. And the angles not only also refer to themselves as angle, angli, and also as agoli. So we find these two forms, agol and angli, both also in the Bible with Ephraim and also amongst the angles in England. We find elements from Ephraim in that area. Also, Ephraim had his sons Shutalach and Bered and Tahath and Eladah. We find these areas placed in area elements in the British Isles. Shutalach gave its name to the Scots. Bered, the Brigands in Ireland, in northern England, and also in Switzerland. Tahath became the Teutons who were attached to the Angles and the Saxons when they invaded England. And Eladah was to be found amongst Ulster, which is not in Ireland was referred to Ulada. Ulada and Eladah are virtually the same name. So here we see elements of Ireland within the British Isles. And so presently we are concentrated on Manasseh being in America. Many of those who migrated to the USA came from Mercia. The Mercians, also known as border folk or boundary people, like many of the immigrants to the USA, to what became America. In the biblical times, we found that amongst the tribe of Manasseh, the women were quite important. The story of the daughters of Zelophehad. Zelophehad in the Bible is mentioned in the book of Numbers. Book of Numbers chapter 27 speaks of the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Heber, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. The families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, came forward, and his daughters' names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses and before Eleazar, the Kohen, and before the chieftains and the entire congregation at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, saying, "Your father died. Our father died in the desert, but he was not in the assembly that banded together against the Lord in Korah's assembly. But he died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should our father's name be eliminated from his family because he had no sons? Give us a portion along with our father's brothers." So Moses brought their case before the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying that Zelophehad's daughters speak justly to you. You shall shortly give them a portion of inheritance along with their father's brothers, and you transfer their father's inheritance to them. So this was a problem. A problem is that inheritance in biblical times went through the son. Went through the sons. And if there were no sons, it went to the daughters. So what happened if the daughter married someone from the other tribe? Therefore, a portion of the tribal inheritance would be transferred to the other tribe. And their main tribe would lose out. So the daughters were making a special request of Moses, that is to the Almighty through Moses, were requesting that something should be done in their case so that they should receive the inheritance of their fathers, and at the same time it should be made certain that this inheritance not passed to another tribe. So this was arranged. It was arranged that they should marry their cousins, and therefore their inheritance would remain in the tribe. But we see here the daughters coming and making the claim on their own and being quite independent, quite carrying the initiative and worrying about the inheritance of their people, of their fathers, tribal pertinence, that their tribal affinity should remain with them. That is what they wanted, and that was what was given unto them. So we see here women having been important, especially amongst the tribe of Manasseh. And women were important amongst the early tribes of America. Women were active, more self-assertive when compared to those of England. And the Talmud also speaks of this in Baba Batra 119b. It says that the daughters of Zelophehad were Torah students. They knew the Bible. They were righteous. They demonstrated wisdom by raising their case in a timely fashion. And they argued, they presented an argument that was coherent, was accepted, and it was based on an analogy to the law that existed. And they demonstrated their righteousness in marrying women who were suited to them, and through whom they could carry on their tribal inheritance. We had Makkah, a wife, with the name Makkah occurs several times within the tribe of Manasseh. You find in 1 Chronicles, chapter 1:14, the sons of Manasseh, Asriel, she bore his Aramean concubine for Machir, the father of Gilead. And this Aramean concubine was known as Makkah or Ma'akah. We find in 1 Chronicles chapter 7, Machir took a wife of Hupim and of Shupim. The name of his sister was Ma'akah. He also had a sister named Ma'akah. The name of the second was Zelophehad, and Zelophehad had daughters. And Machir took a wife of Hupim and Shupim, and the name of his sisters was Ma'akah. And the name of the second was Zelophehad, and Zelophehad had daughters. So we see this name Ma'akah together with that of Zelophehad. And we also find the name Ma'akah in Ulster. We had Eman Makkah. Eman Makkah is the name of a place in Ulster. It's also known as Amag. It's also known as Amag or Amag, where important archaeological findings have been discovered concerning the early settlement there. And Eman Makkah or Avon Vaha, Amon Makkah, it's different ways of pronouncing it, but it contains the two elements, Amen and Makkah. Makkah is the same as Makkah, the wife and the daughter of Machir, the son of Manasseh. Makkah, Amen Makkah, and we also find the word Avna interchanging with Amana in the Hebrew Bible. See 1 Kings 5:12, where it refers to Amana, which may be found within the margins. You may see it. In the Hebrew Bible, it's there. Also pronounced as Avna. So have this interchange of in some places and namesakes between Amana or Amen and Evan. And so too we have Evan Makkah in Ireland. We find Maacah, 1 Chronicles 7, and Maacah, the wife of Gilead. Gilead was a grandson of Manasseh, the son of Machir, and his wife was also known as Maacah. And she bore the Gilead 2 sons. She bore Maacah, the wife of Gilead, bore a son. She named him Peresh, and his brother's name was Sheresh. The sons were Ulam and Rechab. We find this name Peresh in the name of the Parisi, who were in the region of York in England, the area of France, the area of Paris. Paris received its name from this group, from the Parisi, who were descendants of Peresh from Manasseh. And also the USA in its early times had close associations with French. There were people from France who settled in the USA. And also the protection of France was important to the USA in its foundational era. And so too we see this repeated in the names Parisi and Paris, one being in France and the other being in the north of England in the regions associated with Manasseh. And the tribe of half the tribe of Manasseh was to the east of the Jordan, and they neighbored the tribe of Reuben, whom we identify with the people of France. So we find Manasseh. We find Manasseh in America. Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel